Hi everybody, this is Hero back with another Axis and Allies video. And in this video I'm going to detail what I'm calling the Hydra gambit for Germany. So this is something of a take on Sea Lion, but I want to get away from misunderstandings about what this build is about and detail for you some of the major pieces in the first couple of turns. This is a build where you are putting transports and a carrier in Sea Zone 5, which you're going to defend with a couple of fighters at the end of your turn. You're also going to buy a bomber. And the goal of this build really in the first turn is to set up the conditions that allow you to put a lot of pressure on England, both from the Med, you can see I'm moving our transport there to capture Gibraltar, and also from Sea Zone 5. Now in some of the versions that I played, we move our battleship and our transport out to Sea Zone 13 to kill the cruiser while also taking Gibraltar. And the point of that is you force England to make a choice about what it's going to do with its bomber and its fighter planes, and usually they have to come down to 13 and deal with that. The rest of this is somewhat standard in that you're trying to get all of your fighter planes to the west coast by the end of the turn while clearing out Ukraine and going into Karelia, these sorts of things. These are just your standard rolls, and this is a slightly weaker Russia turn 1, so there was only one tank left in Ukraine, but the basic idea applies either way. Here are some of the interesting adjustments. So we're taking one of the subs with one of our fighters, which we're going to end up landing in Morocco. And the reason for that is if we do decide to use that fighter to attack England, because England doesn't stack enough AA guns and infantry, then we can use the Moroccan fighter to join the battle and move our aircraft carrier into Sea Zone 6. And in the event that you do not have that England does stack enough to defend against this first attack, which involves, your 4 transports and all your fighter power, then that Moroccan fighter plane can make its way back up to Sea Zone 5 and into the fight in Russia. So you can see here you're setting everything up in your non-combat moves to ensure that you have your defense 2 fighters, the ones in the Eastern conflict, are coming up to join the aircraft carrier in Sea Zone 5. Everything else is getting stacked around the Baltic, which gives us the best opportunity to counter-punch Russia or transport through to England. So that's the reason why we're setting things up this way. Our deployment, of course, is going to be that singular bomber in Germany, aircraft carrier catching, and the 2 transports. And this is enough to dissuade most English attacks against Sea Zone 5 with the bomber and 2 fighters. You can't really afford to lose those because your defense is really poor as a result. So England builds 4 infantry and 1 AA gun for England, and then 1 infantry and 1 fighter to defend against the Pacific. Likely going for something like a Sea Zone 61 clear to slow down any Indian attack. The Atlantic lacks a lot of good options, so you can try to clear Sea Zone 14, but it's like a 50% chance if I looked at all the calculators, something like that. You still have that cruiser to deal with. That's not always going to be the case. Sometimes that cruiser will not be there for Germany in Sea Zone 7, but really you limit the options that the English have to use their fighter power in turn 1 without it being very expensive for them. So you have to make your purchases before you do that, and since you see all the transports, you think, well, I need to stack up a bit. But then you don't really have a good way to use your fighters. So we end up clearing out Sea Zone 61 in the Japanese Pacific. And then we use the fighters and our destroyer to clear out this cruiser here while doing a bombing raid on Germany. So this is sort of weak. And you're like, wow, hold on. Here, I would have done things differently. I would have attacked Sea Zone 5. I mean, you could, but the very it's like a 47% chance of winning or something on the calculator. And that's a problem because if you lose all these fighter planes, now now you're really in trouble in England and there's no recovery. I think the fleet to Sea Zone 33 is fairly reasonable in this circumstance, and the reason is as follows. What we're hoping to do is get that transport up into the Med as England, or respond to whatever comes from Japan, so it gives India a lot of flexibility there. You're deflecting the German aggression that is in England, and you're also making sure that India is going to be secure while giving you some opportunity in the following turns to pivot. For the Hydra gambit, Germany can just purchase full infantry. And here I want to show you just a check on the English defense. We have brought over the bomber from the US and loading up the 3 tanks from Sea Zone 5, 3 infantry, and then obviously the tank and infantry in Sea Zone 14 is quite a lot of firepower. But what you need is essentially at least 6 infantry, the 2 tanks. You need 2 anti-aircraft guns, in my opinion. And you have your 2 fighters and your 2 bombers. That is sufficient to push back the following German attack. But it's just sort of like barely there. So I don't know if you'd take a 47% chance on the calculator or not. But you could just outright win this as Germany as well. So here's what the Hydra really lets you do, is you can force England to stack just enough defense to survive, and then you can clear out their navy and pivot to Russia. Now there's one mistake I made here, but it's sort of irrelevant for the picture that you're seeing. You can see there's about 13 attackers going into Ukraine. We don't need one of the French fighters. You can see I think there's something like 4 fighters that are brought in here. One of those doesn't need to come here. It can just make its way back up to Sea Zone 5 without any problems. You're basically wiping everything off the face of the map. Russia had some really good punchback there on the defense, but on average we're blowing them out in Ukraine. And then as Germany, what we can do is just maintain this pressure. You clear out everything in the sea zone around there. We now have our German bomber back long term, so we can deal with any US convoys that start to make their way across. And ultimately, we can still apply a lot of pressure to England passively by having these 3 transports in Sea Zone 5. Those transports are so useful because at the end of turn we can shuck a bunch of infantry up into Karelia, and every turn we can toss 6 of the infantry that we dropped in Germany immediately into Karelia. That's skipping an entire turn of marching across, which applies a ton of pressure, making sure that Archangel and Ukraine are loaded up with troops. And you can see here how much pressure that immediately puts on West Russia. How do you hold West Russia? What's England supposed to be doing here to get back into this? Do you just drop an Atlantic fleet that gets bombed? Do you bring the stuff up from the Indian campaign? How do you deal with this? That's the point of this build. I hope you enjoyed.